We're going to suspend action on this bill till Senator Williams can come. And did anyone want to start off the conversation on SB220, or would y'all rather wait for Senator Brass? Wait for Senator Brass? All right, to the committee members, it's we've taken care of most of this in 40 minutes. We're going to suspend action of the committee until the two senators can be here. We've got this room until 12 o'clock. And if you would take a, let's say a 30-minute break.
Trip Mark's bringing lunch.
And we'll reconvene at 11:10.
Mr. Chairman, we have rules also.
We have rules in that. I think we do.
Well,
We got rules at 11.
we have, I think we've got folks that are here to testify on one of these bills. Why
I
don't,
was going to suggest that, Chairman. What you just stated, I was going to suggest maybe allow public testimony in the meantime, if it's more efficient for the committee.
well, somebody, which one of y'all want to explain the gist of the bill?
I can explain the gist.
Well, then you come on up here.
And if I can bring,
Former representative.
if I can bring the father of medical cannabis.
All right.
Get the overall principles.
What we'll do is we'll allow former representative and colleague Lindsey and Gravely to just speak on the gist of the bill until Senator Brass can come. We've got 20 minutes before we have to be at rules. We will do rules, and then immediately after rules, we'll reconvene. All right?
Mr.
You
Chairman,
have
for the record, I'm Edward Lindsay. I'm with the law firm of Denton's, and we represent Botanical Sciences, which is one of the license holders in our state. If I can just sort of give the highlights here, and I would like also to recognize at the table is former Representative Micah Gravely, who is, for want of a better term, the father of medical cannabis in our state, who can sort of speak as to the overall principles of this bill. Basically, if I can sort of walk folks through very briefly what the bill does. If you look at sort of hitting some of the highlights, obviously, Senator Brass can hit some of the more details. It changes the term in Section 2, changes the term from low TH oil in our law to medical cannabis, which more reflects exactly what is involved in our state. At Section 3.1 of the bill, it sets the potency cap at 50% up from 5%. That's primarily as part of the process here, in which we are allowing an oil-based inhalant to more readily get to the patient in terms of their pain. In section by the lines 99 through 143, in terms of changing the possession limits from 20 fluid ounces to 2.0 ounces of medical cannabis or its equivalent. If I may, I'm sort of going through my notes here, Mr. Chairman, sort of hitting the highlights. A big part of the bill is also found at, let's see, whether lines 430 through 446 amends the definition of caregiver, removes the legal guardianship requirements for caregivers of adult patients. This simply is there to make it easier for the patient, to, particularly in institutions, to be able to get the necessary medical cannabis for their needs. A key part of the bill is also found in lines 447 through 474 under conditions. Sort of puts us in line with the rest of the country, which Representative Gravely can speak to, in which it removes severe and end stage from the conditions. It also broadens the definition of Crohn's disease to inflammatory bowel disease, which I believe the doctors here might be able to say is a more accurate statement as to the conditions that are being included. It also adds lupus to the conditions that would be permitted. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would turn it over to Michael Grabley.
Yeah, before we do that, I want to be sure we're working from the same LC because those numbers didn't match on the 470. LC 339799S.
Yes, sir, that's as passed by the Senate. I believe
This is a
the line.
committee substitute that has passed out, but the copy I've got doesn't have a line 474.
We're working off of 9778, so we don't have that updated version, Mr. Chairman.
You have the version as passed by the Senate. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, what line was in question?
Well, I was just noting that
I may have misspoken, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the conditions, it's lines 429 through lines 456. My apologies, Mr. Chairman. And we are operating off of LC 339799S as passed by the Senate.
that is correct. 9799, yes. Before I start taking questions, as I read through the bill, and I was on that back in the day when we did the medical cannabis, it appears to me that this is an upgrade by changing the definitions from low THC to medical cannabis. We're dealing with end-stage disease. To allow that, we added a couple of new terminologies for certain diseases. We've changed the requirement from 5 to 50 milligrams, and we're allowing a different delivery system for the docs
Correct, Mr.
so
Chairman.
that their patients can be better remedied by this. And before the questions get started to the committee, I would encourage you to take a good look, not to be confused with CDB type drinks and those type of things that we'll hear later on during the session. But this is strictly, remember, this is for medical use.
That's right.
So,
It's best to remember that what we're trying to do here is make sure that the people of Georgia who are looking for this relief go and utilize a product that goes through high test in terms of its purity, in terms of trying to protect the consumer, as opposed to going to one of these shops in which they will seek that kind of relief through the hemp, which it does not necessarily go through the safety protections that exist from our medical cannabis.
correct. All right. Chairman Martin.
I have a couple of questions, but I mean, the crux here is you're just expanding who can get access to this and increasing the intensity of the THC.
In part, yes.
In part, or, I mean, that's exactly what it does. I mean, if
Well,
not
that's
for
what,
that, you wouldn't do
I'm
anything
sorry,
else,
but
right?
it's doing other things in addition to that, but yes. it's doing that.
What other things?
Well, we've already mentioned those in terms of changing the name of the,
You could, isn't it true you could hardly call it low THC oil when it's 50%? It's not really low THC oil anymore, so I understand why you're changing it to medical cannabis. Isn't that true?
that's part of it is basically coming up with a product to meet the needs of the people of Georgia, yes.
Okay, so we got a stronger product and we're using it in more places.
In terms of the conditions, yes.
Right, because you're not using, the chairman, is it not true that the chairman spoke that we were previously dealing with end-stage diseases in certain areas, and now we're striking that language, so the first day you're diagnosed with one of these, you'd be eligible for medical cannabis, up to 50%.
With the recognition from the doctor, yes.
I mean, you'd be,
As approved by the doctor, yes. We're putting more into the hands of the medical professionals, yes, sir.
does the gentleman not worry a little bit about the way that started? Something like this sort of started a little over a decade ago with people prescribing opioids early. Overprescribing that. I mean, do you really need to go 10 times as much THC? I mean, this is a question for a lesser condition. I mean, it just seems like we're expanding the scope because we need something to sell.
No, we're not banning the scope for something to sell. We're banning the scope for it to actually meet the needs of the patients as shown by the experience shown in other states.
Well, I mean, California, it's not true that, Colorado legalized it. If that's what we're trying to do, let's just say it.
No, we're not trying to legalize it, Mr. Chairman.
The language on the paper is not true that this oil, and then you strike the section that allows anybody to vape THC medical cannabis. You strike the prohibition to doing this.
We do strike the prohibition because
all levels.
It provides a delivery system to meet the needs of the patient.
But would it not be available for anybody that was using a low THC oil or a consumable in a vaping device?
Subject to the permission of the doctor, yes. We're putting it in the hands of the doctor and the patient.
And I can't recall, Mr. Lindsay and Mr. Gravely, I know you were here. When we heard this before, we were focused, is it not true, on the level of THC, and that's not what we were trying to do. We're trying to have a minimum level of THC and we'll keep it low, and now we're going 10 times that and reducing the severity of a disease in order to get it. Just a serious question, because I mean, you can tell I have some pause here, but a serious question. Do you not see that there would be a one-size-fits-all situation wouldn't work, and that the medical cannabis at various stages would need and should be different amounts at the THC? But the bill doesn't require that.
Thank you. Let me say this. My name's Micah Gravely. I've served in this body for 10 years. I was a co-signer, a co-sponsor, and then an author of this particular measure for several years. I'm here today as a private citizen. I'm not currently employed by anybody other than my other real job, and it has nothing to do with this. I'm here because I believe in this issue. But I think we've learned, to answer your point, we started out with low THC oil. We had requested some higher amounts early on after the medical professionals that we spoke with, and then also the University of Georgia study that came through. However, I think the 5% is where everyone at the time, 10 years ago, was able to agree. I think we've learned a lot in the last decade, quite frankly. We've been able to understand, and I'll give this example, multiple sclerosis, when such disease is diagnosed as severe end stage. I'm working with a person right now who has multiple sclerosis. It's not severe or at end stage, but the response her body has had to THC oil has been unbelievable. Unbelievable. How would I be able to tell this person, or what would it be like to be able to tell this person, think of the treatment you've received in another state and how your body has responded to this disease, how this has been able to change your life in regard to your children, to your marriage. But when you come to our state, I've got to wait for you to get to severe or end stage before you can have this same treatment. And she's having this treatment in a state that mirrors Georgia politically, mirrors Georgia conservatively. Matter of fact, I don't know if y'all have one, but when we talk about an inhalable, which is the delivery system that she's receiving, because number one, back then we were starting an issue that, number one, we had to educate folks on. In the last 10 years, there has been no compromise of our THC medical program in Georgia, low THC medical program in Georgia. No compromise whatsoever. There have been no deaths. There have been no overdoses. We are still not a smoking state. We are still not now someone can make a comment, but you cannot smoke legally in this state. Now, you can go outside this Capitol and someone's smoking it right down the road. I smelled it when I drove in, but that doesn't mean it's legal. I mean, people are, Friday night in Buckhead, people are exceeding the illegal limit of alcohol. That doesn't mean that the law is that they're within the law. So my point is this, I'm going to hold this up. Georgia's one of 2 states. The green states have active medical cannabis programs. They also have inhalable, the delivery system. We're not asking for smoking. If you'll see in this bill, there is no flower in this bill. This is just an inhalable. Us and Alabama are the only 2 that have medical programs in the United States of America that do not have an inhalable. So when you go down to Parkinson's, when you go down to some of these other diseases, when we first started this measure, there was a lot of caution. There was folks that were apprehensive. So we worded it in a way that said, okay, let's at least be diligent and say end stage or severe end stage. But we know now that this is helping people immediately. And it doesn't have to be end stage. Imagine having a splitting headache or a migraine, and you go to get an aspirin, and you're only allowed to get one, but the one you've got has to be cut in 10 pieces, and you only get a 10th to address a splitting headache. Why not just take 2 aspirin? And that's all we're asking from this particular measure here. When you see, I'll just go in my own family. I've got a nephew that's autistic. We work with him in our church program. Our church is fully dedicated to a special needs program, and multiple kids in that program at our church treat with cannabis oil. But they're limited, and some of these kids, some need higher, some need lower. So it's just the matter of, number one, we are still not a smoking state at all. We're not a recreational state. And I think that's because of the guardrails and the boundaries that this body and the body across the hall has put together and maintained, much to the constituency of this state and the programs that we've put together. But we've also been educated and understand how some of these diseases react to the medicine that they're getting. And that's all we're asking, is to allow the folks that qualify in this state to have the right amount that helps their disease. And they're still treating with a doctor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I might, there's a number of the members of the committee, we're on rules, and we're going to suspend action on this bill to, I'd say 11:30,
Okay.
so that we can bring it back at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This committee will be at recess until 11:30, and hopefully by that time we'll have, hopefully the folks that are here to testify will still be available. cut this thing on. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have enough members back for a quorum again, and we're going to resume from the recess that we took to go to rules. Jan is printing up the copy of the 220 that we'll be working from. And that being said, to those folks out there in radar land, if y'all or somebody is sending Jan copies of substitutes, quit. Because we're only going to accept substitutes from the author of the bill or committee members. So while she's getting the proper bill printed up for the committee, we're going to hear Senator Williams. Senator, come on up. Former committee member, distinguished member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll take all those.
And I have a copy of SB. Do you have an amended version?
Yes, sir. I
And
do.
would that be LC 550599S?
Give me just a second. LC 550599S.
We have the right version.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Good, Senator. Welcome back to your old haunting grounds.
Thank you. It feels like home, Mr. Chairman. It's been a many hour in here. Thank you. This bill is coming about to put some safeguards up. I think we're all familiar with the name of the town, Noble, Georgia. Noble, Georgia Tri-State Crematory came about because there were no laws in Georgia regarding crematories. Anyone could go buy the equipment and open up and go to operating and doing cremations. After the Noble, Georgia issue was discovered, then the State Board of Funeral Service had laws enacted that you had to be licensed in order to offer cremations. What we have now is a thing called human composting. This is legal in 13 states, and just last year there was a funeral home or a man and his wife, they were funeral directors, opened up a composting business in Colorado. After clients of that business for several months were unable to get connected to them to find out the status of their loved ones' remains that were being composting, they couldn't get any correspondence, so they contacted the law enforcement, and they went to the facility location, which happened to be in a warehouse area, and upon entering the business location, they found it abandoned and 118 decomposing bodies, human bodies at that location. So what this bill basically is doing is putting guardrails that if anybody wants to do this, they've got to be licensed, they've got to be inspected, they've got to meet the criteria. And so this is just putting guardrails up to make sure that we don't have another situation happen like that here in the state of Georgia. Right now, methods of disposition for human remains, you have burial, you have cremation, you have alkaline hydrolysis, you have donation to medical school or other research facility, and you have what's known as a green burial. Green burial is what some religions do, such as Jewish, Muslim, some of those people, and even down in Conyers, Georgia, the monastery there has green burial grounds. This is where people are not embalmed. They're not placed in protective caskets or vaults. They're allowed to go back to the elements of earth. The difference in that and human composting is that the human composting, that material can be returned to the family, or it can be donated to a land bank, or it could be done many different things. You could put grandma in your flower garden if you want to. I mean, it's just whatever you wish to do. So that's basically what the first part of the bill is. Second part of the bill talks about disturbing graves and getting a land disturbance permit. And it deals with how anyone that wishes to disinter a human remains, that they have to prove their right to control disposition of the human remains in order to get the disinterment. It also has family burial plot protection. It creates an area where if someone, and just this past weekend I got a call from someone wanting to know what they have to do to be buried on their property. So what this does, it outlines, and it does something in all 159 counties. It sets a minimum of what people must do in order to start their own family cemetery on their property. But it does not take away local control. It does allow the local county to set up guidelines that the people would have to meet in order to do that. And it also, another terrible thing that happened down in Douglas, Georgia, Coffee County, just a few months ago. We all read about it, that the sheriff's deputies went to evict a funeral home owner out of his building. Well, when they got there, they discovered 18 decomposing human remains at that funeral home. In talking to some of the state board members, they told me that they had received tips from other people in the area that things were amiss, that things were not being done correctly. And so what this bill does is it outlines that if any board member receives a notification of wrongdoing, whether it be a funeral home, whether it be a cemetery, they're to notify other members of that board and to do a teleconference if needed, and then within 10 days for 2 members of that board to inspect that facility. And the reason for that, right now, the inspectors that are being used by these state boards are people that inspect beauty shops, barber shops, used car dealers. And then they show up at a funeral home not knowing what they're looking at, or not knowing what to look for. So this is something that's very important that I feel, and that's why I'm bringing this legislation, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? Oh, you have lit the board up. Let's see. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
You answered, good to see you, Senator. You answered several of my questions before you finished. But the one, now there really are no inspections of funeral homes.
Well, there's inspections of funeral homes. We're inspected once a year. Food restaurants are inspected, just randomly and very often. But yes, we should be inspected more, and that's what we'll be working on in the future to get more funding. But what this does is whenever somebody files a complaint or they pick up the phone because they know a state board member and they tell them Smith Funeral Home down in XYZ, Georgia, we're hearing rumors that they're doing things that are not professional. They're disrespecting human remains. And this gives them the authority to not wait on a formal complaint, that they can actually talk to other board members and go inspect and see. And who better to do that than another licensed funeral director or embalmer?
All right. Let's see, number 26 down there. Who is that? Chairman Hatchett. Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Senator, appreciate you bringing the bill. Welcome back. I have a number of questions. As you know, I sit next to the chairman of the Funeral Home Caucus. I just want her to know I've never voted against a Funeral Home Caucus endorsed bill. If I understand correctly, as we have here before us, the subcommittee, the bill that went through the subcommittee was 27 pages long.
Yes, sir.
The new bill here before the full committee is 53 pages.
Yes, sir. What we did, we added on that cemetery protection part. Representative Jesse Petrie, who serves in your body, he has a family cemetery down in Burke County, Georgia. And he came to me and talked to me about it, and I had this bill, and we added it on because he has a great-great-grandfather that's buried in that cemetery, and it was family cemetery. But someone out of Florida came up and bought the farm acreage that cemetery sits on, and they put up a fence and some no trespassing signs. So his family now is not able to go visit that grave or that little cemetery to maintain it, to keep it from being overrun or abused. So that's why the additional pages into this was implementing, because it was in the same code section. Ledge Council said they could be compressed so we're in the same title.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, follow up if I may.
Please do.
Well, you led me to that next question 2 of 3. I understand that, in section 12, we talk about creating that new section to obtain a permit from to establish the family burial plot. Let's go with your example and let's just use some round numbers. It's a family farm. I don't own it. It's 100 acres, and my family cemetery is in the middle of that 100 acres, and somebody else has bought it. They've put up a fence, and they're private folks. Should this pass, what am I allowed to do in this scenario if as you mentioned, Chairman Petrie's great-great-great-grandfather's buried? How does that work between family, if you will, family rights versus property rights?
Well, what it does is it tells the property owner to work with the people that have relatives there and work out a mutual time when they would allow those people to come and maintain the family burial ground. It doesn't take away any property rights. What it does is say they must work together, and it creates a process whereby descendants can bring an action against a landowner wherein the deceased relatives' human remains are located to gain access to the land for the purpose of visiting and maintaining the burial ground. But it would be done at a convenient mutual time.
But if I'm a landowner, I'm not obligated to do so. I'm simply encouraged to do so under your measure. Or,
yes, sir.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's a may, not a shall.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Dibney. Number 25, Mr. Ridley.
Okay. It might, Representative Dugan kind of got my question about whenever we originally passed this bill out, it was just about that, and we added it in there. Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't know the rules, but is that should not been amended in committee? Chairman Powell?
I'm sorry.
I was asking, whenever this passed out subcommittee, it was just this 27 pages, and then it comes back to this. What is the rule that we should amended this in the committee with this extra?
One of the members will have to make a motion to accept this substitute.
Okay.
From the author.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Number 19, Mr. McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this bill. Senator, I just had one question. This is a pretty extensive bill, and how does can you walk me through the process of, say, for instance, somebody buys 100 acres and they have, a grave on there. What's the process of relocating those remains? And does this bill change any of that?
No, it actually clears that up, according to Ledge Counsel, that I'd worked closely with Ledge Counsel Nick Tate, in clarifying who has the rights for disposition. One reason we need to clarify this, just a few years ago in Macon, Georgia, a father went and had his child disinterred and the vault placed on the back of his truck, and he carried the deceased, his child, and the marker to Kentucky. He carried it up there to have it interred in a cemetery in Kentucky. But when he got there and contacted the cemetery asked him, where's the permit? He didn't have a permit. In the meantime, the mother and father were divorced. The mother goes to the cemetery to pay her respects to her child, and her child's grave is missing. It's gone. She was not notified. She was not asked for permission. So that's what this also clarifies. For many, many years, we've not had representation of the funeral profession in the legislature, and through ignorance of us funeral directors not knowing how to get things done. And so what basically, in talking to other funeral directors around the state, we've tried to bring us up to current times to prevent Noble, Georgia, Douglas, Georgia, Macon, Georgia, from those catastrophes happening again.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So that was in a regular cemetery, correct? I mean, I'm just, so I guess,
But if it's on a farm, you can still go through that same process. Matter of fact, Senator Frank Ginn in our Senate, when we carried this bill through the Senate, he brought that up, that he had a constituent that had an abandoned grave, one grave in the middle of his farm, and he wanted to get it moved. We improved this bill that would let the landowner petition the court to have that grave disinterred, and it would have to be at the landowner's expense, of course, to have it moved to a cemetery and placed. This also deals with abandoned cemeteries, which is a big issue in a lot of areas throughout the state of Georgia. You can ride through the country and you'll see where a church used to be and there was a cemetery with it. The church is disbanded. It may have been rotted down or burned down, and the cemetery is sitting there abandoned, and it also deals with that. So this is a cleanup bill to deal with a lot of those issues.
one more question, Mr. Chairman, if you may.
Yes, sir.
So one of my concerns as well, so this bill would help if we have a, Revolutionary Soldier or any of those because there are a lot of abandoned cemeteries that have those buried. It would clean, be good for that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I've been involved in disinterring a Confederate soldier, and an archaeologist was there and removed the contents of the grave. So it is done with great care, and this bill outlines what must be done and how it must be done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Chairman Carpenter.
Thank you, Chairman. So just to clarify, so what I'm reading on lines 1260-ish, it's 1265 through 1300, say, it's basically giving people a right. If I own a piece of property and there happens to be a burial site on a piece of property, and people find out from Ohio that their relatives' remains are on that property, they can come ask to visit the grave. And if I deny them, then they can sue me, take me to Superior Court for injunctive relief to allow them visitation rights.
To maintain that cemetery. And here again, it would work down into an area of that you mutually agree upon being able to visit that grave. And legislative council can answer that maybe a little better than I can, being I'm not an attorney.
Right. So what I'm reading is it basically allows the judge to create an order, and part of that order includes lines 1283 through 1288. But it still allows somebody that doesn't own the property to control the guy that does own the property?
Well, it's going to specify the dates and hours that the descendant may enter and remain upon such land. And it might be Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. I know the judges are going to be, they're going to be, fair to the landowner and the descendant, and hopefully that this descendant would find a way to, remove the cemetery and move them to another area. But so many of these cemeteries were started way back when, and when people buy the land, they usually know there's a cemetery on it, and they're not just discovered. When you buy that farm, you know there's a cemetery on it because it's usually platted in the courthouse records. So you would expect to be some heir might want to visit that cemetery.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, personally, I would prefer to see a situation where if people want to come visit we reach some sort of agreement for removing the remains to an alternative site instead of giving people basically backdoor property rights through court. But just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know about backdoor property rights to visit a loved one, but, all right. Any further well, I spoke too quick. Squire Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just thinking, it does create a situation, but as Chairman of the Development Authority, we bought a big piece of property. Several Native American grave sites were on it. We had to, at our expense, bring in archaeologists from Florida State, establish where they are, show proper deference, and allow access. To me, it takes a pretty sorry person not to let you visit your parents or your ancestors' gravesite. Hopefully it wouldn't get to Superior Court, but if it's necessary, it should go to Superior Court because you should not be denied the right, because we do it every day in commercial land purchases. We have to give respect to those grave mounds that we find, and there's really no difference.
Thank you for that.
Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you there, roommate.
Yes, sir.
Hope they get your car fixed. Okay, we're scrambling around trying to read this additional language here. And I guess my questions comes from, under current law, Senator, they can't just arbitrarily move a cemetery now, can they?
No.
You find one on your property, you just can't do it. So I guess it's following that line of questioning. So many of these have historical significance. Is why you don't move them. It's because of a battle or a Indian area or whatever. Does this change the penalty for this? It seems like this is going to make it very easily for a developer to move a cemetery that is in their way of a development.
No, sir, it doesn't. If anything, they've got to submit an application for a disturbance permit, but it also goes back, number one, the person who has the right to control the disposition of the human remains has to consent to the disinterment. So it wouldn't make it easier, but DOT through the years has had to move graves because of them putting a road through where a cemetery might have been. But what this ensures is that they can't just, as one lady did up at Lake Burton just a couple of years ago, she hired someone to go move gravestones. She didn't move the graves. She hired someone to move the gravestones in Eden Cemetery on the banks of Lake Burton. And so this is an issue that this also addresses, that penalties of somebody desecrating a grave. Right now, if you remove some little trinket the size of this microphone or smaller from a headstone or a grave, you've committed a felony. to remove any item from any grave is a felony in the state of Georgia. It does not have to be a monetary amount.
If I could go continue, Mr. Chairman. So look, over here when we're creating the family burial plot, so could someone who had one prior to that go back, if this is passed and goes into action, go petition their county to create they've got one family cemetery now? Can they go back and follow these guidelines and have it, I guess this would be certified? Thank you.
Yes, so what happens now, as I stated earlier, I actually had a phone call over the weekend from someone asking how they could be buried on their own property. Right now, what you have to do is have your property surveyed, and you have to have it recorded in the courthouse that you wish to establish a cemetery on your property. But number one, is there a lien on that property? If there's a lien on that property, you can't encumbrance that, because under law, what's a cemetery? Always a cemetery, unless the graves are removed. So what you have to do is, make sure there's not a lien. You have to get it surveyed, platted, recorded in the courthouse. Some counties do have stipulations that it has to be so big and it has to have perpetual access, and that's what's laid out in this. That if you're going to establish a cemetery on your private property, you've got to do so in mind that someone and the family is going to have perpetual access to that cemetery.
Okay. So your opinion, you could go back if this is passed to the county, because I have one on my farm that we created 20 years ago.
Okay.
No, I just did it on the fly.
Right. Well, you don't have to, you're grandfathered in. It wouldn't go back and affect you because you already have it, but that's just someone wanting to establish one in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have any other questions from the committee? This is interesting, and to my dear friend, you've brought a few bills over the years dealing with this. And as you well know, I'm not I get a little queasy about some things. And I remember, Bill, you brought about putting the body in a glass jug and full of acid and all that. And it was kind of interesting. And now you bring another one about this green remains. So I'm just asking this question since this is a great learning process to me. So under this green remains, how does that work?
This is actually, it's not cheap. It's not inexpensive. Cremation right now average in Georgia is around $2,500. This process, human composting, is going to be close to $10,000. So it's not inexpensive. So what this is doing is somebody could actually do that now in their backyard. There's no law against it. This is saying, though, if you're going to do it, this bill would make them be licensed and regulated. But it's done in an environment that is that shows respect to the deceased, and it's not done in a mass subject matter. They're done each individual, and they're placed into a capsule with other organic materials, and it allows the body to naturally decompose right into the nutrients and earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
But the bones don't deteriorate, do they?
They would over a period of time. They would decalcify.
All right. But you can but somebody could do this their own self now.
Yes, sir. No law against it.
I don't think I need to ask you any more questions I've got. I'm trying to wrap my hands around this idea, but my thought is I don't want to put me out in the backyard and let my dog carry my arm off somewhere, But, all right. number 21.
At the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
If there's no other questions from the committee, I think this is the appropriate time. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman, that we accept this author's substitute Senate Bill 241.
All right. Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Do we have any further questions? Comments? What was the report from the subcommittee on this?
That's what I was going with this whole thing. So what we done in our committee is just the LC 550530, the original bill, which just took in consideration of the natural organic part of it. And I sure appreciate my friend, but I'm a little worried that all this added in this new bill is going to have a lot of pause from members. And I'd like just to pass out the original bill, and then let's work on this other stuff and get everybody's questions answered.
Well, you can make that as a form of a motion, but if I understand, the extra added pages dealt with which part?
It dealt with the cemetery protection and the setting up the cemeteries and clearing up who has the rights for disposition. So that's basically what that other part came up with, and dealing with the issue that happened down in Douglas, Georgia, where the funeral home, and the kicker is that funeral home was inspected the second week of July. The deputies went to evict that funeral director in August, and they found the 18 decomposing bodies. The inspector from the State Board of Funeral Service did not find them, and they didn't show up in 3 weeks and get into an advanced stage of decomposition.
And I don't think anybody's got a problem with that. I think the problem with having a cemetery on your property and giving somebody access is, I think, is going to be my pause about that section of this bill, because if I'm court ordered now, who's got liability when somebody trips and falls on my property? Are they going to be able to sue me for it? Do I have immunity from being sued because of that property? I just think there's a whole lot more questions about that one section in here that needs to be answered.
This possible legal counsel, Nick Tate, May can answer that question. He helped author that. But there again, it was encouraging people to talk, the landowner and the descendant. And I've had situations that people have come to me and they've gone to the sheriff and gotten the sheriff to escort them onto the property. So it's taking place now with the sheriff. And a lot of times the local law enforcement doesn't want to get involved. But this is some Revolutionary soldiers in Wilkinson County that heirs came down. All they wanted to do was visit the grave, photograph the headstone, make sure that it wasn't being overrun or in terrible condition. But the landowner stopped them, wouldn't let them go on. Well, they came down a long ways, so I just asked them to call the local sheriff. They did, and the sheriff escorted them onto the property. So a lot of times it's way to mediate it out.
And I guess that would be fine if that was in law, that you got to have a law enforcement agent, because then it takes me out of being responsible if they trip and fall or a tree branch falls on their head on my property. Because at the end of the day, that cemetery is on my property, right? Even though it's platted out. If they're out there cleaning it up and a tree limb falls and hits one of them in the head, then now I've got a lawsuit against me because that is my property. And I think there just needs to be a little more lined out in that one section to protect the landowner and protect the other family also.
Let me ask you this question. Even if you have no trespassing signs on your property and somebody comes onto your property, not to visit a cemetery, but trespassing, they get injured, do they still have the right to file a suit against you?
Well, they do, but it's going to be harder for me to prove. It's probably going to be harder for a jury to award anything to them on it. Where in this spot, now I've let them come on my property, so I've given them permission It goes back to the old invitee part of the tort reform thing. Now I've given permission to come on my property, so now am I responsible for them?
There again, I have to ask Ledge Counsel if he would weigh in on this, and if you need
If I
to.
might, let me just make it at the discretion of the chairman. Do I see anyone else that has concerns with this? All right, we do. All right. If you would, at the discretion of the chair, we're going to hold this bill, and we're going to let Representative Ridley as the subcommittee chair. Chairman Dibnick, would you like to work with him? And who else down there raised their hand?
Chairman Martin.
Chairman Martin? Do you have time to work with these guys to clean up any issues about going on private property to pay respects to your descendants?
Anything we can do to help the current.
All right, would you three, and Carper, would you four work with the good senator to see if y'all can get whatever language that would make y'all feel soft and gentle about this issue?
That works for me.
And if y'all can do that, I would prefer if y'all could do it. Tomorrow's a work day. We may or may not be able to get a room. We know, but maybe tomorrow, or at least by Thursday, have a meeting to move his bill forward.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
And
Thank you, committee. I
Thank you for
appreciate
the
it.
connotation that there's another way to dispose of my remains.
Thank you, sir.
I was always concerned that somebody was going to take my ashes one day and take me out to Vegas for a trip around the world one more time. But now they can do my organic remains if they can get me out of the tomato garden.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
All right. Now, come on up, Senator. I apologize, but we've all had an interesting morning so far. All right, we're going to start over again, and you have a version of 220, and we're back to the original version. Now, this has not gone through a subcommittee. I wanted the full committee to hear this presentation, and this deals with medical cannabis, not recreational cannabis. This is medical cannabis. Senator?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So this is Senate Bill 220, working off of CSFA. So as the bill is passed through the Senate. And first, I want to tell you quickly why this issue is important to me. So when we set out on the study committee back in 2018, myself and our former colleague and friend Micah Gravely, Representative Gravely, we co-chaired that committee together, both House and Senate, because we knew that if it was a House idea, Senate wouldn't go for it. If it was a Senate idea, the House wouldn't go for it. So we insisted on it being together, and we set out to do it together, and we did it. In the final meeting of that study committee, got a letter from a world-renowned neurologist at the Shepherd Center, and that letter was in support of medical cannabis for MS patients. I thought I recognized the doctor's name, and I quickly sent a picture of that letter to my mom, and I said, "Mom, do you recognize this doctor?" And she said, "Yes, that's my doctor and been my doctor for 30 years. My mom has had MS, or was diagnosed with MS back in like 1999. So here I am with the ability to give my mom's doctor another tool in the tool chest to treat my mother. Now, she's never used it. I don't think she ever will need it, but it is there should she need it. And that is why I'm passionate about this issue. And I'm passionate for every patient that has one of the diagnoses that is listed. And so that is why we're bringing Senate Bill 220. The commission, our Medical Marijuana Commission, or actually it's called the Low THC Oil Commission, they did a listening session, listening tour, with patients and doctors. They did it over the summer, and basically it was a survey of where the program's working, where it's not working, And so some of the things that came back are what is reflected in this bill. And I'll just quickly walk you through that bill. So one of the things that came back in that listening tour was that the term low THC oil was very confusing to both patients and doctors. And so with that, we're changing the name from low THC oil program to the medical cannabis. So you'll see strikes through that throughout the first few pages. And then when you get into, I'm looking on page 4, we get into definition of medical cannabis, and we had to make a few changes there because we're, again, not calling it low THC oil. Now on line 88, this is one of the controversial parts of the bill, and there's 3 parts, and I'll cover them all. Number 1 is we want to change the percent from 5% cap to 50%. We heard again in that listening tour, it came back that it wasn't enough percentage for some of these patients to work. So that is the purpose of that. If you look at, there's 18 other states that are medical marijuana only states, medical cannabis states, 18 of them. The lowest in all of those is 50%. The highest cap is 70, so that ranges anywhere in medical only states. It ranges from 50 to 70, and we are currently at 5. And so between the patients that need it and allowing doctors to prescribe down like they do in just about every other drug out on the market, they can change the dosage and they can change the percent themselves, or at least recommend it. So that is the purpose, going from 5 to 50. Moving on through the bill, if you get into page 7, you'll see some strikes through some of the penalties. Now, the penalties are still covered in 144 through 152. We did change because we changed the ounces. We're changing it from fluid ounces to regular ounces. So that ounces is going to 2 ounces versus, I think it was 20 fluid ounces or something fluid ounces. Now, 153 through 164, you're going to see strikes through all of those. That is pertaining to the research facilities. After we passed the program in 2019, we came back, I believe, in 21, and we took out some of the research stuff. And so this is one thing, this is really just cleanup language because we actually never took out the penalties for that. So that is what 153 through 164 is. Moving on, let's see, just more definitions on page 10. Continuing page 11, we are still just changing the name from low THC oil to medical cannabis. And then on page 12, lines 274 through 279, we're making it clear that the commission can engage in public awareness activities. Moving on, in lines 326 and 327, because the licensees are not allowed to go out and educate public or the doctors, we're allowing third-party associations can do that on their behalf. They just can't promote one company over another or one product over another. They can just educate on the benefits and negatives of the use of this medicine. So moving on, starting on line 395, I'm on page 16, that's section 3-7. We're repealing that section. This is the second part that is controversial, and this is vaping. The reason for vaping is some patients need immediate action from the medicine. If one of the conditions allowed is under epilepsy or some sort of seizure disorder. If someone is about to have a seizure, taking oil and waiting 1 hour, 2 hours, however long it takes, is not going to help that patient. So the need for vaping or the need for immediate action is there. My original version of this bill was going to allow flower and allow smoking, and then talked with Senator Watson, who's obviously a physician. We didn't feel like that could pass the Senate, and plus he wasn't for that, and so I agreed to take that part out and allow the vaping. But we do need that immediate action for some of these patients. Again, moving on. Section 3-10 on page 18. This was actually done on the floor. I did it as a floor amendment, and it's allowing the caregivers to go pick up the medicine. So this, in some of our nursing homes with Alzheimer's and dementia patients, they need it, but they can't leave the facility, so they need somebody that can go get it for them. Plus, you might have someone with severe autism or various other, maybe a cancer patient going through chemo, can't physically drive, and so they got to have somebody that can go get it for them. So that was the purpose of that. Now, getting into, on page 19, this is the conditions. This is the third and final, I'd say the last controversial thing, major controversial part of this bill. First thing is we're changing Crohn's disease to inflammatory bowel disease, and we're adding lupus. Now, the purpose of that was back before, when we set up the study committee in 2018, we added a provision with that law. We did it on Sine Die 2018, it was 2018. And that provision said that in order to add an illness or take away an illness, DPH, in conjunction with the Composite Medical Board, had to make recommendations. So we received a letter from both. It's actually a joint letter from the two of them, and they asked that we make those changes. Number one, changing Crohn's disease to IBS, and then two, adding lupus. So that was our good law working. And then the other part we did was we've struck through when such disease is diagnosed as severe or end stage. We did that on almost all of them. We left it under peripheral neuropathy, and except we did strike end stage because there's no such thing as end stage peripheral neuropathy. So we did leave severe there. That was to make sure like patients with carpal tunnel weren't going to be using the product. And then we left under PTSD, we still left the requirement of 18, and then under autism, we still left it there, but also has to be 18 unless severe or end stage. So, but one thing we did come back, because we removed that provision on severe or end stage, we came back and added this language, and it's starting on line 447, and it says, condition means any of the following, provided that the patient's symptoms associated with any such condition can reasonably be expected to be relieved by the use of medical cannabis, and the potential benefits of such use to the patient outweigh the potential health risks that such use might pose to the patient. And I think that is a little more clear for our doctors. Again, if you read the report from that listening tour, just the confusion around severe, determining when severe, was tough, and so that's the purpose of why we took those out. But I still wanted some sort of safeguard in there, and so I added that provision under condition. So that's really kind of the meat and potatoes of the bill and the need for the bill, and I'm sure there are plenty of questions, and I'm more than happy to yield at your...
Thank you, Senator. Number 17, Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, a couple of questions. On line 88, you explain why to cap it at 50%. Is that because our list of uses may not require 70%? Is that the reason why you cap it in at 50%?
I'll be honest, the cap of 50 for me was more of a political decision, deciding what I can pass through the Senate and what I can't. My original version had no cap. And so when we looked at the other medical cannabis states, 18 of them, I felt like going with that lower cap was going to be more palatable to the Senate and hopefully to the House as well. So that's the sole purpose for that. There are probably going to be some patients that may need more than that 50%, and they're just, they're going to have to take more of the product, and that's, but going from 5 to 50 is a large leap, politically speaking, and so that is really the main purpose.
Okay. And my last question, if I may do a follow-up, Mr. Chair. On line 464 and wherever else you have at least the age of 18. So what about for my constituents that may have children on the spectrum and they're under the age of 18? Can they not have access to this medicinal?
So the doctor would have to consider it severe autism under the age of 18. And one of the reasons we kept that provision in was just because the brain is still developing at that age, and really it's past 18, but at 18 they're considered an adult, but yeah, if it's not considered severe, then no, they would not qualify.
Because I have one constituent where her daughter were having like seizures.
She would qualify under seizures.
Oh, she will?
Yeah, so if you, let's see.
'Cause I didn't see that.
Yeah, seizures is on here. I just got to find it. Line 456, seizure disorders related to the diagnosis of epilepsy or trauma-related head injury. So
okay.
I think they would call it, but that would be up for a doctor to determine that.
All right. Thank you.
Kevin Carpenter.
Thank you, Chairman. Senator Brass, question. I'm just trying to think about the logistics of acquiring the product. So if it's a 2-ounce max that an individual can have in their possession, is that, how many cartridges is that? Because to me it seems like if you're going to the dispensary to get your medicine, that seems pretty limiting.
Yeah, so the 2 ounces, I'm told if you get it in capsule form, that's enough to supply you for 30 days. And some of these patients are having to drive 4 hours across the state, and so we didn't want to make them. The original bill I introduced, actually, I took it down to 1 ounce, but that was because I was thinking of flour, and I'm told 1 ounce of flour is a lot, so I thought that was more than enough, and but then in talking with the commission, that capsule in that 30-day would be very helpful, and that was why we did the 2 ounces.
I got you, because that's just my concern from an efficiency standpoint. If you're having to go get a 2-day supply every 2 days, how do you live your normal life? The other comment would be if you've got a medical provider that's going like a caregiver, making them go to the store every 2 days is pretty inconvenient as well. So.
Right, but once a month I think is
that's reasonable.
It's still going to be a pain, but again, there's. What we don't want is we don't want excess out there. I think we've learned that from the opioid epidemic. When people have leftover drugs, people tend to take them.
Sure.
And so we did want to limit it to a certain extent.
And then one follow-up, and I don't know if you have this information now, but I know you talked about doctors prescribing down. Is there any information out there in other states that have a higher number? How many what percentage trades down? Or is it always hey, if it's 70, 90% of it's 70, some of it's 50, but the majority of it's still going out at 70, if that makes sense.
Well, and so. I misspoke a little bit. So the doctors actually in Georgia aren't allowed to prescribe. They don't prescribe the medicine. They essentially sign off that these patients have one of these 7, or I think we're up to 19 conditions. So there's two conditions the doctors have to do to even be able to do that. Well, that's one of the two. The other one is they have to register with DPH as a medical marijuana physician, or I don't know what the technical term is, but they register with DPH, and then they sign off on the condition. So they actually, technically aren't making recommendations. They just say that it can help, and they're saying that, the potential benefits of such use could outweigh the symptoms of what this patient has. That's essentially what they're doing. Now, it's really going to be the way our law is crafted, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but federal law is also part of this as well. It's going to be really up to the patients to decide, they probably should dose up and not dose down. We've got patients that are at 5%, and essentially they are dosing up right now. They're having to, take, instead of one tincture, they might be doing 2. They might be doing 10. If they're doing 10, well, then they would just need 1 of the 50%. And what this also allows is the license holders, the manufacturers, they can make it in different doses. They can do it in 50, 40, 30, 20, and the labeling is there. And so that'll help the patients as well. But unfortunately, the way our laws are crafted, and it's just a matter of what we can pass and what we can't, it is solely up to the patients to figure out how much they can take.
Okay. We got them all lit up now. Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Brass, I think for me, I would like for you to give me this report from the commission, because I think you have some knowledge I don't have.
Sure.
And
it's public. It's public record. I pulled it online.
Well, if you just fire it to me, because I think you got some background here that I don't have that
sure.
Concerns.
You have it. You just didn't know you had it.
Yeah, it's out there somewhere, like everything. But on the 50% going from 2 or 5 to 50, is there any research that shows that that's an appropriate level? It's not 35, 25, 50, whatever. Is it just? I think, like you said, it was a political decision, but there's no.
There's technically there is no recognized research in the country, this country, around cannabis, because it is a Schedule I drug, meaning the feds have said for, 100 years now that it has no medical value. Yet in countries all over the world, there are reports and there is research around cannabis. We just simply don't recognize it. So until the feds get it out of Schedule I and into Schedule II or below, we're never going to have any research on it. So the only real research we do have is patients that have been taking this since 2019 when we passed the law. So that's where our research is, and that's where the listening tour that I'll be more than happy to share with you. I'll walk you straight to the link for it. You can read it there, and that's where our research is, field research, good old-fashioned way.
Practical is what you would say. On this, I guess when you made me write a question down a moment ago, when we talked about the doctor, all he's doing is saying, Rick, this is something you could use, it may help. So on the other end of the seller, the guy that you're going to that's going to provide you
the dispensary.
The dispensary.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any check and balance on their end? I mean, of what they're telling people, physician says use this, but now,
Right. So I will say they are subject matter experts. If there's not a doctor sitting in there per se. Now I toured a dispensary down in Florida, and I walked out of there and I said, I told the person that took me, I said, essentially Florida's legalized marijuana. And they said, oh, no, you got to have a card. And I said, yeah, but their list of conditions, you know, it got a little out of control, and pretty much anybody can get a card down there. And I said, but the difference is when you walk into the dispensary, there's people that actually can make a recommendation on what your symptoms are and what strand of cannabis they may have. And they were very knowledgeable, and they take pride in that. And I said, the difference, you know, I walk in there, let's say I have a card, I walk in there, I'm going to have somebody that has some knowledge of this product and how it can help me. And then I'm only going to get enough supply to last me 30 days. And then I've got to come back in. I said, now, if I turn around and walk into a liquor store to treat my back pain, you know, and I go ask the clerk there, what do you recommend for back pain? They're going to give me a 30-day, or they might give me a 100-day supply of tequila. And I can walk back in the next day and ask them if they got any other recommendations. I'll get a 30-day supply of vodka. And so that's kind of, you know, where I think we got to think differently than what we've been thinking for the last 100 years in this state, and really in this country, is we've got this stigma around cannabis, and we're so scared of it that we forget the big picture, and we forget these people with 19 conditions is all we're talking about, of people we're trying to help with something besides opioids, something that has obviously helped these people. I mean, during Representative Gravely and our study committee, we heard from a mother whose daughter was having 100 seizures a day. And then they tried cannabis and went to having 2 to 3 a week. That's a medicine to me.
Sure.
I don't need research to tell me that. I don't need a paper from a doctor telling me that. That's real. And if that were my child, I'd be doing the same thing. Yeah. And I know I went all around your question, and I tried to answer it.
We were there.
Sorry, I got on a soapbox.
But if I can, Mr. Chairman, a couple more. You know, so at the dispensary, I come in with my prescription. This is just a logistic thing I'm just curious about. So do they take that prescription?
You're not coming in with a prescription. You're coming in with a card.
Okay, I come in with a card.
Your doctor has signed off that you have one of these conditions. The doctor then sends that to DPH with the form they filled out, and then DPH then either mails you the card or they mail it to your local health department and you go pick it up. So you're walking in with essentially a license to purchase.
Yes, sir. So just sort of like your vodka question I'm going to ask.
Okay.
So I can go to Lauren's dispensary
Mm-hmm.
and then go that afternoon. I get whatever I want to. Can I then take that card and go to this dispensary? How do they limit me just dispensary shopping or going to 2 different places and getting more? I'm just curious.
I believe it's all logged in with DPH.
Yeah, I'm just, you know.
So I'm pretty certain that's all. And there's industry experts here. I'm sure they can answer that question. But I believe there's a tracking system where they file everything with DPH. Okay. So you couldn't do that.
And my last one is that in states that have seen this change, is there any evidence that there are more providers, more usage by license holders that has increased?
I didn't understand your question.
So like in states that have went up to 50% or what?
They didn't go up. They started at 50.
Or 70 or 0.
We're the only one that started at 5. We're the only one that started below 50 to my knowledge.
So going to 50, have they seen, do they have more people participating? They have more providers creating cards than we do now?
I don't know the answer to that. I haven't. Are you talking about? I guess you're talking about more doctors
that are participating in the program, but also then using of more patients that taking advantage of the program.
I would imagine there'd be more patients taking advantage of the program, and that is again for me the purpose of this bill is not to expand the program, is to expand access for those that are eligible for the program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you. Mr. McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, thank you for not adding glaucoma to this list, just kidding. So, I have a question. I appreciate you bringing this as a Desert Storm veteran. I know this is huge for veterans, and I know it's very successful. I'd much rather see them taking this than using this than opioids, for sure. My only concern is, and I've asked you this before, so this is a vape pen, correct, that you smoke and the smell, I mean, obviously smoke comes out and it has a...
Well, vape comes out.
Yeah,
which,
but it still has
which vaporizes,
right,
within seconds.
But it still has the pungent smell, I guess. And this is my
For about
question.
a second, yes.
Yeah. So this is my question. So we really, this isn't really against your bill, but my question is, so we do this, and I'm standing in line at McDonald's with my 6 kids, and somebody comes in and it's vaping because obviously they have a medical card. And I know a lot of times they need it then, but we have no guardrails at all. That's, obviously they'll have a sign on the door that says no vaping, but if they say, well, I've got a medical card, I need it right now. Our other things that we have in place for alcohol, you can't drive down the road drinking, and I know me and you've had this conversation, and you can't walk down the street with a beer in your hand, which I know there again, if you need it, you need it, if it's a medical emergency or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess my question is, do you feel like that maybe in a future bill or something, we need to kind of clean up some, guardrails of some of those things that you can't do this stuff obviously in public, per se?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not touching any of those laws, so whatever laws are on the books would apply. And if it became a problem, or even if we want to head it off before it becomes a problem, I'm all for it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Number 15, that would be...
Yes, sir. I'll try to bring a couple questions.
What's your number?
Number 15.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Brass, I just want to go back to something you said earlier, just as it relates to THC in general. When you were talking about somebody under 18, not having access to it unless it was a severe situation.
Severe autism. That's correct.
Right. Yeah. Just but you said that and you said the reason for that was because the brain's still developing.
Correct.
So I just wanted, is not true that was you kind of noticing that it is a known fact that THC does have detrimental effects on a developing brain.
If abused, yes,
No,
just
no,
like
again,
anything else. Correct.
Chairman, I'm not trying to be adversarial at that.
No.
You made a good point there, and I was just acknowledging that for us all here, that it is not true. Where you're pointing this makes sense. My concern is this, and help me with this. Because we had 5% in THC was where we came out, because when we heard this in 2018 and before, it was the cannabidiol oil, that was the portion of it. It was the CBD that was the medicinal part, and we were trying to cut down the THC. We now seem to have moved toward we need THC for the medicinal side. Do you remember those conversations?
Yeah, I don't remember THC not being a part of the conversation. I mean, I helped co-chair the study committee that set up the program, so THC was always a part of the conversation, and that was why it was such a tough issue.
I understand it, but that's why it was limited at 5% at that time.
Well, that, and it was the political reality at the time was that was as good as we were going to get.
So my question
and the political realities changed because our state is changing. We're changing. We're evolving.
So again, and I'm asking the question, and so your committee and the report we'll get that Chairman Jaspers mentioned kind of leans into the THC portion of it as more needed today, or maybe there's more experience with it today than it was in the past. Mm-hmm. So my question goes along the lines, specifically as the last gentleman's, is vape, if a store had, or an individual place had no vaping, you wouldn't necessarily be able to vape this product. If it said no vaping, you can't you can't think of it. That would, whatever
I
current law.
don't, yeah, I don't see how that law would change.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying, so we do that. So,
Now, I'll say this, if I'm sitting there and I'm about to have a seizure in the middle of a McDonald's, then I'd probably take the
Sure.
penalty and just go ahead and hit my vape.
No.
If I
I
was
don't
Yeah.
mean to laugh, it was just to hit your
Yeah.
vape, is what made me grin there. But no, I understand, certainly in emergent situations.
Right.
But, I think the folks that would do this, would do that, I believe that. So the last question is this, looking at this, my concern is the changes that were made throughout, up to and including the definition of product, that we could go into, that this up to 50% could go into gummies, could go into oils, could go into everything.
Mm-hmm.
And what my concern is, and I'm trying to put this in a question, is how do we control the bad actors? That this product looks the same at 50% as what some folks are buying at the store, that's primarily, it's CBD based, has, 1 milligram of THC in it. How do we protect that from somebody, because you could have a CBD gummy in a high school, right?
Right.
I think you can do that. How do we do that and protect the bad actors? Because I got on my phone
It's simple.
an ad here
yeah.
that you can, it's a $99, send me, we'll approve you online for a Georgia card.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that? Just
Because the bad actors aren't going to go pay extra money for something that's half the strength, that's harder to get. Because they're going to go to the streets and they're going to buy dope off the streets. That's where the bad actors are going. They're not walking into a doctor's office to get something that's half of what they can get out there. That's twice the cost.
But
anybody in here can spend 30 minutes in downtown Atlanta and find weed.
I don't think this allows for.
It does not.
Okay, so
and that's where the bad actors are going.
So,
They're not walking into dispensaries.
But my question, though, would you not agree that if you're a 16-year-old kid, we already said below 18, it's not good for you to take in mass quantities to abuse, as the gentleman said. So, but you could have somebody 18 or above, or your older 21 brother, that have these gummies that have 50%, and I don't know, if you eat a couple of those, do you get high? I mean, is that enough? I don't know.
Probably so.
So how do we, let's assume somebody's getting them from the right people, and you're a teacher in high school and you see these gummies, how do you know those are okay but those are not? How do you, is it labeling?
I get it, they don't.
Okay.
You can go buy a gummy in a gas station and get high. That's state law right now. You can walk into a gas station and buy a CBD, as you call it, CBD gummy, derived from hemp, Delta 8 or Delta 9. You can walk into a gas station and get high. That's where your bad actors are going. They're going to get the cheap high. This is a very expensive and arduous way to chase a high. And if that's all you care about, you're not going to go through this process. But if you have one of these, if you have seizures, you have MS, you have mitochondrial disease, Parkinson's disease, sickle cell, you're not out chasing a high. You're out chasing treatment for your symptoms. And you are going to go through this process. And these are the only people we're talking about. The ones I just named plus others, Tourette's, severe autism, I don't even know what epidermal whatever is. Alzheimer's, AIDS. They're not chasing high, they're chasing relief. And there's a difference. There's a big difference. And that's all we're talking about. We're not talking about recreational marijuana. That is not what this bill does.
Yeah, well, I'll get with you. Yeah, I'll get with you offline for the.
Sure.
Yeah, if I might interject, and I want to thank you, Senator, for your last editorial about this. But before this thing gets out of hand, I want to tell you, we're going to probably have to come back either tomorrow or the next day on this. And I apologize to the folks that were here to testify today. But I want to thank you for clarifying something. I want every member of this committee to hear this. Gummies aren't legal, THC gummies. Right now is oil. And I want you to remember something. We're not talking about recreational marijuana. We're talking about medical marijuana. You know, I jumped on this back years ago when I was chairing public safety, when Alan Peake was in the House. And that's the therapeutic value of something that's not made in a clinical laboratory. Y'all remember the term opioids? If y'all remember that term that I said then and I still say, that anything that's grown naturally has got to be better than something made in a laboratory. Quite frankly, my position hadn't changed. Something that God grows naturally. We legalized this product under the strict conditions of it being medical. For all the talk about gummies and getting high and all of that, let me tell you something. I made a prediction when this very committee that I sat on with Senator Brass and Gravely, that all the criteria that was put into this to basically put these guardrails up, I said then that we're going to make this stuff so expensive that folks are going to go out there and buy street weed, because you can buy street weed a whole lot cheaper than you can buy this. But for these people who have a medical condition that needs some kind of relief, they want something that has been basically tested as pure, as not adulterated, and that's what we're dealing with. So we're not dealing with gummies, we ain't dealing with grass, we ain't dealing with anything. If I understand the bill right from the senator, he's raising that elevation of the strength, and he's giving doctors the ability to give another way for those people who need a quicker relief than waiting around for an hour for something to digest in their system. Is that pretty well what I'm getting to here?
Yes, sir.
Now, I want to thank the members of this committee. We convene in about 1 minute. So I'm going to recess this meeting, and we will be in touch with y'all about the next available room that we can meet in, and it may be tomorrow or it may be on Thursday. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies to the folks who are here. Gee.